Let me ask you something. Have you ever found yourself hoping someone would just wake up and realize how amazing you are? That if you just gave a little more, tried a little harder, stayed a little longer, they'd finally give you what you truly deserve? And yet, the more you gave, the more invisible you seem to become. If that sounds familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. Chasing does not earn you love. It erodes your power. And today, we're flipping the script. Because if you want more from someone, chasing them is the last thing you should do. There's a better way. A way that honors your value, protects your dignity, and draws the right person toward you without you having to beg for crumbs. This is not about games. This is about energy, confidence, and mastering the subtle art of self-respect. Let's dive into the 4 powerful shifts that will help you stop chasing and start choosing. When you want more from someone, it's easy to slip into the belief that more effort will fix what feels off. That if you just showed them how committed you are, how much you care, how patient, flexible, or forgiving you can be, they'll finally give you the love or attention you crave. But here's the brutal truth we don't often want to admit to ourselves. No one wakes up and suddenly values what they've never had to earn. It's human nature. We tend to take for granted what chases us. Not because people are cruel, but because we are wired to appreciate what we have to invest in. That's the psychology of value. And it's why, the moment we begin to chase, we unknowingly lower the very value we hope they'll recognize in us. Every time you cancel your plans to make room for someone else's vague schedule, every time you double text after they've ghosted your last message, every time you excuse a lack of effort with they're just busy, you chip away at your own center of gravity. And the more you bend, the more they lean back. This is where that awful emotional loop begins, where you're constantly giving more in the hope that something, anything will change. But the reality is that dynamic doesn't inspire love. It breeds emotional imbalance. You can't build intimacy on imbalance. You can't win someone over by dissolving yourself. When we feel emotionally underfed by someone, our instinct is to overcompensate. We give more, hoping they'll match it. But it doesn't work like that. The more you give without reciprocity, the more you teach them that you don't require reciprocity. You teach them that this is what you'll accept. And trust me, they will learn that lesson quickly. Not through your words, but through your actions. The key is to pull your energy back, not as a tactic, not to manipulate, but as an act of coming home to yourself. It means taking the time and energy you've been giving to them and pouring it into your own world again. Reconnecting with the things that make you feel alive. Doing the things that remind you that your life is not a waiting room for someone else's love. It's your own beautiful, ever-evolving experience. And here's what most people don't realize. This act of reinvestment, this reclaiming of your energy, it shifts everything. Because when you become less available, not out of pettiness, but out of purpose, you signal that your attention is valuable, that your presence isn't guaranteed, that if someone wants to be close to you, it takes showing up with consistency, intention, and respect. That shift in energy, when it's rooted in authentic self-respect, is magnetic. Because you're no longer chasing, you're choosing. And this leads directly into one of the most transformational shifts anyone can make, replacing pursuit with standards. What does that actually mean? It means you stop trying to impress someone into seeing your worth, and instead decide what you're no longer available for. You set a bar, not just for how people treat you, but for how you treat yourself. Standards are not ultimatums. They're quiet truths you live by. They say, I'm not available for hot and cold behavior. They say, if you're inconsistent, you lose access to me. They say, if I feel anxious more than I feel safe, this is not for me. And the moment you begin living by your standards rather than your fears of being alone, you become a force. Because people will start to sense something different in you, a level of calm certainty, a quiet refusal to beg for crumbs. That doesn't mean people won't test your boundaries. In fact, they often will. But the power lies in your response. You don't have to yell, argue, or plead. You simply hold your standard. If someone flakes repeatedly, you stop trying to make plans. If someone only reaches out late at night, you don't respond. Not because you're trying to punish them, but because that kind of treatment doesn't align with the life you're building. The beauty of living this way is that it becomes less about them and so much more about you. You start to realize you don't need to micromanage someone else's actions to feel secure. You just need to be clear about what you will and won't allow in your world. And when you operate from that place, love becomes a lot less confusing because the people who aren't meant for you naturally fall away. Not because you push them, but because your standard created a filter they couldn't pass through. And the ones who are meant for you, they rise to meet you. Not because you chase them, but because you finally stop chasing anyone at all. Ask ChatGPT. When we find ourselves wanting more from someone, our minds naturally lock into the loop of how do they feel about me? We analyze their texts, read between the lines, dissect their tone, their silence, the frequency of their calls, anything that might hint at where we stand in their heart. But there's a truth we often miss when we become so focused on their feelings. Their feelings aren't the only ones that matter. In fact, the more urgent question is, how do I feel when I'm with them? Because that feeling, that internal emotional landscape you experience in their presence, is your compass. And it's never wrong. We're taught to look outward for validation. Do they compliment us? Do they plan a date? Do they remember our birthday? We wait for signs. We crave confirmation that we matter. But in doing so, we forget to check in with the one person whose emotional truth is the most important in the room. Ourselves. Are you energized or are you drained? Do you feel confident or do you shrink a little more every time you see their name pop up on your phone? Do you feel safe, adored, prioritized, or are you constantly negotiating with yourself to tolerate being sidelined? Sometimes the body knows before the mind is willing to admit it. You feel in your stomach, in your chest, that quiet tension, that hesitation before reaching out, that slight panic when they take too long to reply. We tell ourselves we're just being insecure or overthinking, but often those feelings aren't signs of our brokenness. They're signals from our intuition. They're asking us to stop bypassing our own emotional reality in the name of preserving a connection that doesn't fully hold us. This is the heartbreak of so many relationships. We get so focused on how to get them to love us that we completely abandon the part of us that's quietly whispering, "This doesn't feel good." We chase connection and lose connection with ourselves. We start to accept a watered-down version of love because we're too afraid to face what it means if we stop chasing it. But the moment we shift the question from "do they like me" to "do I like how I feel with them?" everything changes. Because then, love becomes a choice, not a performance. And when you stop performing and start observing, you begin to realize the truth, that the love you're craving from someone else is not actually what they're giving you. It's what you're hoping they'll eventually become. You're not in love with what's real. You're in love with the potential. And there is a deep sadness in that, because you're building castles on clouds, hoping one day it'll turn into concrete. But real love doesn't feel like anxiety. It feels like clarity. It feels like home. That brings us to a crucial but often misunderstood truth. When you stop chasing, you create space. And in that space, clarity walks in. Not just for them, but for you. That space is not a tactic. It's not a power move. It's not a way to make someone miss you or suddenly value you. It's a boundary. It's the courageous act of stepping back so you can finally see the situation for what it is. But let's be honest, space is uncomfortable. It brings with it the silence that we've been trying so hard to fill. When we stop texting first, when we stop initiating, when we stop chasing, it feels like we're doing something wrong. Like we're going to lose everything if we don't keep pushing. And that's because we've been conditioned to believe that relationships are built through constant effort. But not all effort is productive. Some of it is just noise. And sometimes silence is what reveals the truth that effort kept hidden. When you step back and create space, two things happen. First, You get to see who they really are when you're no longer doing the emotional heavy lifting. Do they reach out? Do they show up? Do they ask about you? Or does the silence stretch on because your presence was the only thing keeping the connection alive? That alone tells you everything. Because if they disappear when you stop chasing, they were never really there in the first place. Second, and maybe more importantly, space gives you the room to reconnect with your own strength, with your dignity, with the part of you that remembers who you were before you made this person the center of your emotional world. You begin to remember what peace feels like. You begin to hear your own voice again. And in that silence, you find something far more valuable than their attention. You find clarity. And with clarity comes power. Not power over them, but power within you. The kind of power that allows you to say, if this isn't for me, I will not force it to be. So many people never allow themselves that space. They're too afraid of what the silence might reveal. But the truth is, the silence doesn't create the truth. It just uncovers it. And that's where healing begins. Because once you know what you're dealing with, you can finally decide with certainty, is this love real or just a dream I've been fighting to keep alive? Ask ChatGPT. You're not here to audition for someone's love. You're not here to beg, to shrink, or to hope that someone finally gives you the bare minimum. You are here to be met fully, deeply, and consistently. And to be met that way, you have to stop chasing people who are only offering you pieces. You have to become the person who is so rooted in her worth that silence doesn't scare her, and settling is no longer an option. If this message spoke to you, I want to hear from you. Share your story in the comments. What resonated? What clicked? What shift are you making starting today? And if you found value in this, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice in the comments matters. Your presence here matters. And before you go, drop a topic you'd love me to speak on next. This space is your community. Let's grow it together. Your worth is not up for debate, and the right person will never make you chase it.